Hi everyone, welcome back to Dr. Han's Pharmacy Classroom Pro. Now, I hope everyone has had a nice summer break. I sure did because I went to Tokyo and toured the entire island of Taiwan in June and part of July. Now I'm back to begin a new mini-series related to sports medicine and doping in sport. Now, there will be a total of 11 small lectures in this series designed to give an introduction to the topic. So let's get started. Topics that will be covered in this series includes history of doping in sport, current controversies in PED or performance enhancing drug use, regulation of doping in sports, and then we'll move on to individual classes such as anabolic agents, blood and genetic doping, hormone and metabolic modulators, peptide hormones and growth factors, diuretics and masking agents, stimulants, and some miscellaneous agents. And we will wrap up this series with a brief talk on herbal supplements and over-the-counter medications or drugs that can have effects on sports performance. Let's look at a brief history of doping. In this lecture, we will define performance-enhancing drugs, understand the history of doping in sports, explain historical significant incidents of doping in sport. So the question is, how would you define a performance-enhancing drug or PED? Or have you heard of the term PED before? In brief, performance-enhancing drugs or PEDs are substances or methods that athletes may use to improve their physical abilities, strength, endurance, or overall performance in sports. Now, these substances or methods are intended to provide athletes with a competitive advantage over their opponents. However, their use is often, if not always, prohibited by sports governing bodies and organizations to ensure fair and equitable competition. Now, one of the major governing bodies, the World Anti-Doping Agency or WADA, defines performance-enhancing drugs based on a set of criteria designed to maintain the integrity of sports and safeguard athletes' health. Now, to be classified as a PED, it must fulfill at least two of the following three criteria. First, there must be scientific evidence suggesting the potential use for sport performance enhancement. And second, there should be scientific indications of possible health risks associated with its use. And third, it should be deemed a violation of the spirit of sport, encompassing the principles of fair play, ethics, and honesty. Now, alternatively, even if a substance or method meets just one criteria, it may still be considered prohibited if it has the potential to mask doping, preventing the detection of other banned substances and methods. When we talk about performance-enhancing drugs, it is almost always associated with the term doping. Doping is derived from the word dope. Dope is actually a colloquial term used in South Africa to refer to an alcoholic beverages. Now, typically a shot or a measure of spirits or hot liquor. Now, the origin of the term dope in this context is believed to be derived from the Dutch word doop, which historically referred to a type of sauce or gravy, and later came to be associated with alcoholic drinks. Now, eventually, the term doping began to be used in the context of sports to describe the practice of administering substances to enhance athletic performance. The use of performance-enhancing substances and methods is not unique to modern times. Historical accounts suggest that even ancient civilizations explored various means in pursuit of enhanced physical abilities. In the case of ancient Egypt, there are references to a concussion made from the hooves of Abyssinian donkeys that was believed to enhance performance. This mixture reportedly involved grinding the hooves, boiling them in oil, and adding flavors such as rose petals and rose hips. While the exact details and effects of such preparations remain a subject of historical speculation, these practices offer a glimpse into the lengths to which people throughout history have gone in their quest for improved athletic powers. The Olympic Games, with their rich history dating back to ancient times, have seen various intriguing methods employed by athletes to enhance their performance. In 668 BC, Chalmers, the victor of the 200-meter sprint, employed a unique strategy on relying on a specialized diet of dried figs. Now, this example highlights the early recognition of the role of nutrition in athletic performance. Moreover, reports suggest that ancient Greek athletes experimented with substances such as psychoactive mushrooms and fortifying drinks in their pursuit of an edge. The use of these substances was likely motivated by the belief that they could provide physical or psychological benefits. In ancient Rome, gladiators often faced brutal combat in arenas, and some historical accounts suggest that stimulants might have been used to help them endure pain and fatigue, allowing them to continue fighting despite injuries sustained during combat. Similarly, in the medieval period, knights engaged in grueling battles that demanded exceptional physical and mental stamina. It's believed that stimulants might have been employed to temporarily mask pain and exhaustion, enabling these warriors to press on and fulfill their duties on the battlefield. The emergence of doping in cycling serve as a significant chapter in the history of sports and performance enhancement. In the late 19th to early 20th centuries, as competitive cycling gained popularity. Notably, cyclists of that era experimented with substances like strychnine. Although lethal at higher dose, it has stimulant-like effect at a low dose, which was believed to enhance alertness and energy levels. Additionally, caffeine, a widely consumed stimulant, was used to boost endurance and reduce fatigue, while cocaine's stimulating effect were also exploited by some cyclists. Surprisingly, even alcohol was considered by some as a potential performance enhancer, as it was thought to provide temporary relief from pain and discomfort and calming effect. However, the tragic case of Arthur Linton in 1886 stands as a somber reminder of the early and dangerous experiments with doping in the world of sports. Linton, a professional cyclist, participated in the race in Paris at that time, and in a bid to enhance his performance, it's believed that his trainer administered a combination of substances, including strychnine and cocaine. These potent stimulants were thought to provide Linton with increased energy and stamina during the demanding race. Tragically, the use of such concussion resulted in Linton's untimely death, raising alarm about the dangers of unregulated and uninformed doping practices. In 1904, Olympic Games in St. Louis, Missouri, Thomas Hicks, a marathon runner from the United States, participated in that event. And during the race, Hicks began to show signs of extreme exhaustion and dehydration as he approached the later stages of the competition. In an attempt to revive him and help him complete the race, Hicks' trainers administered a combination of strychnine and brandy. Despite the unconventional approach, Hicks managed to finish the marathon and claimed the gold medal. In 1920, a significant milestone in the history of doping and performance-enhancing drugs occurred with the development of amphetamine, which became the first PED to be synthesized in a laboratory. Amphetamine is a stimulant that can increase alertness, energy, and endurance, making it appealing to athletes seeking an edge in their performance. During this era, there were limited regulations and controls on the use of PEDs in sport. As a result, athletes were able to use substances like amphetamine freely, often without facing significant consequences or scrutiny. In 1928, the International Amateur Athletic Federation, IAAF, which is now known as the International Association of Athletic Federations, took a significant step by becoming one of the first sports organizations to explicitly ban doping. This marked a formal acknowledgement of the need to maintain fair and clean competition in athletics. However, it is important to note that during this time, the means to effectively test for and detect doping were not yet available. As a result, while the ban was in place, there were limited practical measures to enforce it or to verify whether athletes were adhering to the prohibition on doping. Now, it wasn't until much later in the 20th century that advancements in scientific testing methods and increased awareness of the prevalence and risk of doping led to the establishment of more comprehensive anti-doping efforts. The 1950s marked a significant turning point in the history of doping in sports with the emergence of anabolic steroids. These synthetic substances, derived from the male sex hormone testosterone, gained popularity for their ability to promote muscle growth and enhance athletic performance. In 1954, at the World Weightlifting Championships, suspicions arose regarding the Soviet team's use of testosterone, foreshadowing the broader introduction of anabolic steroids into the world of sports. A pivotal moment came in 1958 when Dianabol, the first anabolic steroid, was synthesized in Germany. This marked the beginning of a new era in doping, as Dianabol muscle-building properties garnered attention from athletes and trainers seeking an advantage. And by the early 1960s, anabolic steroids like Dianabol had found their way into competitive sports. American weightlifters were among the first to use Dianabol, with reports indicating its presence at the 1962 World Championship. The tragic deaths of athletes due to amphetamine-induced heat exhaustion serve as sobering reminders of the potential dangers associated with the misuse of performance-enhancing substances. It turns out that amphetamine makes it harder for the body to regulate temperature. During the 1960 Rome Olympics, Danish cyclist Jensen lost his life during the 100-kilometer time trial. It was later revealed that he had taken a mixture of a Ranacoid, a vasodilator containing the amphetamine compound, and theophylline to enhance his performance. This combination substance likely contributed to the severe heat exhaustion and dehydration, ultimately leading to Jensen's tragic passing. Another instance occurred in the 1960 Tour de France, where British cyclist Tom Simpson suffered from amphetamine-induced heat exhaustion while competing on the grueling mount stage. Now, Simpson had reported ingested a combination of amphetamines and brandy in an effort to combat fatigue and continue the race. Unfortunately, this combination had severe consequences, and he tragically died during the event. The International Olympic Committee, IOC, took significant steps in the late 1960s to address the issue of doping in sports and to establish a framework for anti-doping effort. In 1967, the IOC established a medical commission recognizing the need for a dedicated body to address health and medical matters in the realm of sports. As part of its effort, the IOC created a list of banned substances, outlining categories of prohibited substances that included stimulants, sympathomimetics, substances that mimic the effects of the sympathetic nervous system, and narcotics. Now, building on these initial measures, the IOC introduced mandatory drug testing at the Olympic Games in 1968. This marked the first instance of systematic and compulsory testing for banned substances at both the Winter and Summer Olympic Games. The German Democratic Republic doping program, active during the 1970s and 1980s, stands as a haunting example of state-sponsored doping in sports. This program is one of the first major instances of a systematic, government-controlled effort to administer performance-enhancing drugs to athletes. Over 2,000 athletes were systematically subject to PEDs as part of a coordinated collaboration between physicians, scientists, and sports officials. An alarming aspect of the GDR doping program was the emphasis on administering androgens, which are a type of anabolic steroid, to women and even adolescent girls. The ban on anabolic steroids was a direct response to the growing concerns about the misuse of PEDs. Anabolic steroids were officially added to the International Olympic Committee's list of prohibited substances in 1976. The first official testing for these substances were conducted during the 1976 Montreal Olympic Games, marking a significant step in the effort to curb doping in sports. And around this time, the concept of blood doping also began to emerge. Blood doping involves manipulating an athlete's blood to increase its oxygen-carrying capacity, thereby enhancing endurance and performance. Blood doping is a method of artificially increasing an athlete's red blood cell count to enhance oxygen-carrying capacity and performance. In 1985, blood doping was officially added to the International Olympic Committee's list of prohibited substances and methods. An example of blood doping's use emerged during the 1984 LA Olympics, where the U.S. cycling team reportedly employed this method. And around this time, the concept of therapeutic use exemption, or TUEs, was introduced to address the legitimate medical needs of athletes. TUEs allow athletes to use prohibited substances if they have a genuine medical condition that requires treatment with those substances. And for instance, athletes with asthma may be granted a TUE to use medications like albuterol. Now, this provision aimed to strike a balance between the health and well-being of athletes and the integrity of competitive sports. Canadian sprinter Ben Johnson's victory in the 100-meter race at the 1988 Seoul Olympics initially captured headlines. However, his subsequent positive drug test for santosolo, an anabolic steroid, led to his disqualification and the stripping of his gold medal. Now, this incident with Ben Johnson exposed the use of anabolic steroids not only in pure strength events, but also in sprinting, highlighting the broader reach of performance-enhancing substances in various athletic disciplines. It was revealed that 6 out of the 8 sprinters who competed in the 100-meter final were implicated in doping, underscoring the widespread nature of the issue. The emergence of recombinant erythropoietin, EPO, in the late 1980s brought about a new era in the world of doping and performance enhancement. EPO is a hormone that stimulates the production of red blood cells, which can increase oxygen carrying capacity and endurance. Its availability on the market opened up new possibilities for athletes seeking to gain a competitive edge. However, the introduction of EPO also coincided with a concerning trend in the cycling community. A cluster of sudden deaths among European cyclists raised suspicions of a potential link between EPO use and these tragic incidents. It was believed that the misuse of EPO, which could significantly increase the thickness of the blood, might lead to adverse cardiovascular events and contribute to these fatalities. The 1994 Winter Olympic Games introduced a significant advancement in anti-doping measures with the implementation of blood testing. Athletes were subjected to blood tests to assess whether their blood parameters fell within an acceptable range. This initiative aimed to establish a normal range for blood values, which would later contribute to the development of the athlete's biological passport. This innovative approach would help detect abnormal variation in an athlete's blood values over time, potentially indicating the use of prohibited substances or methods. During the late 1990s, an alarming trend emerged as positive drug tests revealed that athletes had been unknowingly consuming supplements contaminated with nandrolone, an anabolic steroid. Now, these cases highlighted the risks associated with the lack of regulation and quality control in dietary supplements, underscoring the importance of athlete education and caution when using such products. The Festina affair in 1998 sent shockwaves throughout the world of professional cycling. A police raid on the Tour de France team's car revealed large quantities of EPO and other performance-enhancing drugs. This scandal exposed a widespread practice of systematic doping within the team, bringing the issues of doping in sports to the forefront of public consciousness. The Festina affair served as the turning point, emphasizing the need for a comprehensive and unified approach to anti-doping efforts on a global scale. Because of all these past events, the International Olympic Committee convened the World Conference on Doping in Sport, recognizing the urgent need for a coordinated and global effort to address the issues of doping and ensure fair play, athlete health, and integrity in sports. As a result of this conference, WADA, World Anti-Doping Agency, was founded to serve as an independent international organization dedicated to coordinating and promoting anti-doping efforts worldwide. Moving on to the 21st century, the validation of a test for EPO marked a significant milestone in the ongoing battle against doping in sports. This breakthrough occurred just in time for the 2000 Olympics, allowing for more effective detection of EPO use among athletes. During the 2000 Olympic Games, 5 Chinese track and field athletes were withdrawn from competition due to suspected EPO use. The use of EPO continued to be a concern in subsequent years. At the 2008 Beijing Olympics, 5 athletes were disqualified for using EPO. In 2004, pseudoephedrine, a common decongestant found in cold and allergy medications, was temporarily removed from the World Anti-Doping Agency prohibited list. However, it was subsequently reintroduced with a urinary threshold to account for inadvertent exposure and to differentiate between therapeutic use and potential abuse. The introduction of designer drug from illicit drug suppliers added a new layer of complexity to anti-doping efforts. These substances were specifically designed to be difficult to detect through standard testing methods, making them a significant challenge for anti-doping organizations. The Bay Area Laboratory Cooperative Mobelco scandal brought to light the use of novel and undetectable substances by high-profile athletes. One such substance was TGH, or tetrahydrogestrone, known as the Clear, which was developed to evade detection. An investigation by the U.S. government revealed the widespread use of TGH and other banned substances among multiple athletes. And with that, Raw Dew was launched in 2006, which is a joint operation between the WADA and the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, or the DEA. It was a significant law enforcement effort aimed to uncovering and combating doping activities, particularly the trafficking of performance-enhancing substances. It targeted the illicit production and distribution of steroids and other banned substances. The operation resulted in a total of 124 arrests and the seizure of substantial quantities of steroids from 56 laboratories across the United States. These laboratories were primarily obtaining their supplies from sources in China. Operation Pearl, a high-profile anti-doping investigation that unfolded in 2006, exposed a widespread doping network in professional cycling. It was initiated by Spanish law enforcement. The operation revealed a laboratory where frozen blood packs and various prohibited substances were discovered. The investigation implicated multiple cyclists, many of whom were set to participate in the prestigious Tour de France. As a result of the revelation, several cyclists were withdrawn from the race. Back in the US, Jones, a highly successful American track and field athlete, faced a dramatic downfall in her career due to her involvement in doping. In 2007, Jones admitted to using the performance-enhancing substance, the Clear, leading up to the 2000 Sydney Olympic Games. Now, Jones' admission came after years of denying any wrongdoing and claiming her innocence. However, she eventually confessed to use banned substances, acknowledging that her performances during the 2000 Olympics had been tainted by doping. As a result, she was stripped of the 3 gold medals and 1 bronze medal she had won at the Sydney Games. and more famously, Lance Armstrong, a legendary figure in professional cycling, became a central figure in one of the most notorious doping scandals in sports history. In 2012, the U.S. anti-doping agency, USADA, dealt a devastating blow to Armstrong's legacy by announcing his lifetime ineligibility and disqualification of competition results achieved since August 1998. The investigation into Armstrong and his team, the U.S. Postal Service Pro Cycling Team, revealed a widespread and highly sophisticated doping program. USADA described it as the most sophisticated, professionalized, and successful doping program that sport has ever seen. As a result of the investigation, Armstrong was stripped of all 7 of his Tour de France titles, and his reputation as one of the greatest cyclists of all time was tarnished. Perhaps the most famous doping scandal was the systematic doping scandal that unfolded in Russia, which was a significant and far-reaching episode in the world of sports. It reveals a widespread and organized efforts to manipulate anti-doping protocols. The scandal was exposed when a Russian anti-doping agency, Rusada employee, provided information to WADA about the systematic doping practices in the country. The revelations led to a series of investigations and sanctions. A total of 51 Olympic medals were ultimately stripped from Russian athletes due to doping violations. These violations encompassed both the Olympic and Paralympic Games, affecting a range of sports and disciplines. The scandal highlighted the extensive nature of the doping problem in Russia and raised serious concerns about the integrity of the anti-doping system and fair competition in international sports. Icarus is a documentary film available on Netflix, directed by Brian Fogel. Now, the film explores the wide-reaching implication of doping in sports, particularly in the context of cycling and the Russian doping scandal. And for those of you who have subscription to Netflix, I encourage you to check it out. But if you don't bother to subscribe. I'm not sponsored by that company. And finally, in 2022, Kamila Valieva is a Russian figure skater who gained attention in the international figure skating scene. However, her career faced a setback when she tested positive for the banned heart medication trimetazidine. Trimetazidine is a medication used to treat angina, a condition characterized by chest pain or discomfort caused by reduced blood flow to the heart muscle. It is classified as a prohibited substance by the WADA when used in competition, as it can potentially provide an unfair advantage to athletes by improving blood flow and oxygen delivery to muscle. We've just spent about 30 minutes looking at the history of doping in sports. It is a complex and evolving narrative that spans centuries. From ancient civilizations to modern times, the drive to enhance athletic performance has led to the use of various substances and methods, often blurring the lines between fair play and unfair advantage. Throughout history, athletes have sought ways to push their limits, sometimes at the cost of their own health and the integrity of competition. And in this series, we will continue to explore the rules and regulations as well as the science behind different classes of doping agents. I hope to see you all again in the coming weeks. So, stay tuned and take care. This is Dr. Han from Dr. Han's Pharmacy Classroom Pro. See you next time.